coming up.
I had sleep apnea when I was just a baby.
She thought she was the sickest little girl in the world.
Then it graduated to a seizure disorder, muscular dystrophy, to leukemia.
But it was all a lie,
She controlled everything in my life.
made up by her cruel mother.
She was particularly manipulative.
So Gypsy-Rose took drastic action.
Whose plan was it to kill your mother?
It was my plan.
Hello and welcome to the 60 Minutes podcast, Extra Minutes. I'm Amelia Adams and I'm joined today by our producer, Nichola Younger. Nikki, welcome.
Thank you.
Or
Thanks for
welcome
having
back,
me again.
I should say.
Thank you.
And we're here to discuss a fascinating story and character, Gypsy-Rose Blanchard. I want to ask you first up, do you think after the time that we spent with Gypsy-Rose in New Orleans, she is a victim or a murderer?
Look, this is a hard one, and I think a lot of our audience will probably feel the same. I'm torn. We delve into our story and we'll go into it a little bit later, but, she had a traumatic, controlling upbringing, and I can see why she snapped and ultimately, murdered her mum or was, helped murder her mum. So I understand. So I'm torn.
Yeah, she's a really interesting character. She was convicted of second-degree murder.
Yes.
For organising the brutal stabbing of her mother, Dee Blanchard. And I think it's a question she says she gets asked a lot because she is a convicted felon in America. We caught up with her about a year after she left jail.
Yes.
Where she served 8.5 years of a 10-year service sentence, I should say, for second-degree murder. But she was also, as you say, very much a victim. She had an incredibly abusive childhood at the hands of her mother.
Yeah, she was controlled in all aspects of her life. She had no friends. She, was drugged to the point where she thought, she was mimicking symptoms of being unwell. Her mum shaved her head, put her in a wheelchair, said she had leukemia. An interesting point, which she says in our interview, is it wasn't until she got arrested that she actually didn't know that she didn't even
She still thought she had cancer.
Yeah.
Even when she was handcuffed and taken to
until her lawyer was present, she didn't know that she didn't.
It's hard to imagine as a parent, but I think for anyone, a little child who's actually perfectly healthy and their parent, their mother, pretending that they are terminally ill. Her mother, Dee, as you say, mimicked these illnesses, took her from hospital to hospital, confined her to a wheelchair that she didn't need, told everyone she couldn't walk. She could walk. She knew she could walk.
Yeah.
And because she grew up like that from such a young age, I think she felt she had to go along with this farce to keep her mother happy.
Yeah, I mean, we ask her in the interview, why didn't she just get, walk out of that wheelchair, you know what I mean? But she says, it's very much like domestic violence, people in those situations. She had tried to escape before, came home and obviously then, was punished for trying to do that. So I think for her, it was more like, I'm just going to have to put up with this because if I don't,
she felt she tried everything to escape her mother's evil clutches, really.
Yeah, and I mean, her mum, even to the extent of, isolated her from her father,
lied to the whole family about these supposed illnesses.
Yeah, lied to medical professionals. Hurricane Katrina, she used as obviously a way, a lot of the medical records of gypsies.
Well, that's right. Their home was washed away in the hurricane.
So
and there were no medical records to prove that she wasn't a very sick little girl or she wasn't dying of leukemia.
Yeah, and in our story we speak to one of the, well-regarded professors in Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
So we should point out Dee Blanchard, Gypsy's mother, had a very, very severe, but a textbook case, we were told, of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And Professor Beatrice Yorker, who we talked to in the story, is really one of the leading experts in this form of child abuse.
Yeah, she delves into the idea. I mean, front of mind for all of us is this a mental illness? And she says, no, it's not. She says these people who do this are very, well aware of what they're doing. A lot of the times, they're doing it for attention. They're doing it for financial gain. You know, in Gypsy's situation, they got house out of it. They went to Disneyland. They got free holidays. And I think she was riding on this.
The attention.
The
giveaways. I think one thing that kept coming back up for you and I as we were travelling to New Orleans, spending time with Gypsy in different scenarios, sitting down and interviewing her over a couple of hours, was that question for us both of how did her mother get away with it?
Yeah.
Because this went on until Gypsy was 23 years old. And I found that to be one of the most fascinating facets of the story. And for anyone who wants a little bit more information on Munchausen syndrome by proxy, we do have an extended explainer on our YouTube channel with Professor Beatrice Yorker, which is well worth watching. But evidently, the medical system and doctors are trained to believe a parent's story. Because why would any mother turn up to emergency and say, why would any mother make their child vomit, pretend they couldn't walk, shave their head, give them pills to give them side effects? It is torturous, severe child abuse.
Yep. And as Professor Yorker points out, she had such a tight control over Gypsy, you know, to the point she even had a feeding tube
inserted in her stomach when she was 8 years old, meaning that Dee Dee could literally put anything into her daughter's body.
Yeah.
And she deprived her of food. We know that. She didn't eat normal food.
Yeah.
Until she was in jail, she told us.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a funny, we can delve into that in a minute, but you know, back to the feeding tube side of things, Professor Yorker says that once, you know, you have that inserted in you, you really have total control.
Yeah.
So she could, you know, put whatever in a stomach. And then when you front up to an emergency room, like you said, and she looks malnutritioned, she looks dehydrated, the doctors automatically are going to do, you know,
whatever they need to do to treat it.
She even got her teeth pulled out at, you know, one point.
And as we discovered, Gypsy was treated by more than 150 doctors and medical specialists across several states, because her mother, when questions were raised, would simply move doctors, move hospitals and tell the same story all over again.
Yeah.
And so with that context, you can see why when Gypsy hit her early 20s, she started to discover through the internet in a hidden computer in her room that there was a world out there. As you said, she tried running away. Her mother beat her, chained her to her bed. She knew, she felt, as she told us, she felt her only way out was for her mother to die. It was her or her mum. And so she then hatched this plan to get rid of her mother.
Yeah, ultimately she snapped. She'd had enough, really. And hearing her talk about that whole, you know, the murder and how it all is just...
Oh, it was so chilling, wasn't it? Yeah. I was so struck by how detached she was. I mean, she's, you know, 10 years since the crime?
Yep.
And almost surreal the way she was so calm, wasn't she?
Very calm.
Just talking through. I mean, her boyfriend, she met Nicholas Go-to-John online.
Yeah, on a Christian Day
So they'd only met in person once.
Yep.
And then hatched this plan. He travelled across the country to commit the murder with a knife that Gypsy provided. She let him into their house while Dee Dee Blanchard slept.
She was in the bathroom.
But when she described that to us, she was so sort of calm and, yes, I was in the bathroom and he stabbed her 17 times. Maybe that's part of how she's sort of still processing.
Yeah, I think it might be a coping mechanism for her, you know. She has had cameras in front of her from day dot since she's come out of prison.
Yeah.
So that's another element in itself.
Well, let's talk about that, because only in America could this convicted murderer become then this famous reality TV star come influencer.
Yeah.
As you said, she'd done a reality TV show deal from the moment she stepped foot out of jail. She was on camera.
Yep.
And she's really only a couple of years on wrapping that up. She's had 2 seasons, I think, of a very,
the second season's just about to come out.
Yeah, very popular.
Yeah, very popular. She has, you know,
documenting everything she's done since, which would be, I mean, when you look at someone who's had a completely abnormal, bizarre childhood, she never had a normal life. She didn't have friends, she didn't go to school. Her education level is still great too, she tells us. She's organised her mother's murder. Then she's gone to jail. she hasn't come out into, okay, what is the real world? How do I adapt into society? She's come out to be, she's on the Kardashian. She's
Dr. Phil.
Spruiking various products on Instagram. It's still a very unusual existence, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we also, talk about this in our story, but she says at one point, like, her going to jail was the first time she really had freedom.
Oh, I found that fascinating.
And she actually really enjoyed it. She was able to have a job. She was able to eat what she wanted
and
to
she
eat.
made friends.
Yeah.
Which gives you a sense of, it was a good reminder for me in that interview of how horrible her life must have been at home with her mother.
Yeah.
For her to get to jail and say, this is the best thing I've ever experienced.
Yeah. And that's what she says. She says that. She says, I had a, great time in there. I mean, I don't know about great time, but, she was able to have a bit more freedom. It is fascinating.
It's extraordinary.
And how composed and calm she is just.
And also perhaps that's part of why, I've noticed the internet is so divided on this. There's numerous documentaries and various podcasts and online sleuths who have dedicated so much time and energy to this case because it was it hit the headlines when it happened.
Yeah.
And then again when she was released. And I think we were both very conscious in our research and in our preparing for that interview and the shoot that she is a convicted murderer. But at the same time, I mean, we have to admit we were in tears at the end of that interview. Both of us had a little. Yeah. It was really emotional.
Yeah, it was emotional, and I think we've said it a few times. I think it's the first time I've
seen you cry.
Yeah. I think the thing is for someone to get to the point where they have to do that.
Yeah.
You obviously are at breaking point.
Yeah.
And then, I don't think, she brings up, and she, I've read a lot of things and been quoted. She does have a lot of guilt about it all.
She does, yeah.
But to get to that point where you've got to do something like that is quite, insane to think. And, hearing her talk about it, I did get teary because it's just so.
It was a horrendous childhood.
Yeah.
Horrendous.
Yeah.
The positive side of this is she has got a fresh start out of jail, and we spent some time with Ken, her lovely fiancé.
Yes.
Now they were she was heavily pregnant at the time. This is going back a couple of months. We spent time with them.
Yeah.
They were expecting their first child, which they've now had, little baby
Aurora. Yeah.
And that was lovely, just being at home with her, with Ken, who's a great cook, by the way, as you'll see in the story.
Yeah, and in that story, that's the first time she's had salmon. So they sat down. Obviously, Ken cooked up a feast.
Yes.
You guys sat down, and that was the first time Gypsy had salmon.
Which was interesting because she kept saying, every day out of jail, there's still a new experience.
Yeah.
Her mother didn't feed her proper food. She was on a feeding tube. Then she went to jail and just sort of ate mush. So at the age of, what is she now, 32, 33?
Yeah.
She's still sort of discovering the world as she's becoming a new mother.
Yeah, it's
so,
pretty
there's a
wild.
lot going on for her.
Yeah.
But I guess the fresh start is, as I discussed with her, how do you approach motherhood when your experience of motherhood has been so abusive, so horrendous, so sick and evil, and ultimately fatal? But she didn't seem perturbed or anxious at all.
No, not at all. I mean, again, I think it is a coping mechanism for her. I think probably behind closed doors she's a bit different, and she's had cameras in her face since day dot since she's been released.
So maybe there's a bit of a character there.
Yeah, I think so. And she said to us, she is a people pleaser. She,
Yes.
wants to make sure everyone is happy. And
Which
you
is
could
how
see
she was
that
brought
when-
up.
Yeah, you could see that when you were around her as well.
Yeah.
Nothing was too much. She was always very obliging to do whatever we wanted, and you know what it's like
She
in
was.
this. Let's do this many takes of that. So she was.
Yeah, it's arduous.
Yeah, but they were also, they have had camera crews with them. In fact, when we were there, that was the first 2 days they hadn't had their
Their
life
reality
after,
TV show crew, yeah.
But they,
And then we rocked up.
Yeah, but they were kind of
More
telling us
cameras.
about how to do things because they're so used to having people, around all the
which
time.
again to me was bizarre because I just thought, my goodness, this woman who still seems in many ways like a sweet little girl to me.
Yeah.
Even though she was, about to become a mother, has just never experienced normal life. But maybe she will now.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, she's had baby Aurora. And she said to us, I know Life After Lockout Part 2 or Season 2 is out now, but she said that's basically up until her birth, and then now she wants to kind of step back. and
She's
not
had
be in
enough.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a decision for her daughter too. She didn't want to expose her daughter to the public spotlight.
Yeah.
I think it's been a lot.
Yeah, I think so. And I think obviously every day she's kind of navigating all of that. And I think she's come to realise that, you know, she does want to step back out of it.
Yeah.
You know, in saying all that, she's still got parole conditions.
She is still on parole for a little while, for another 6 months, I think.
Yeah. So that's also something that she is navigating with.
Yeah, I was conflicted. You know, I thought in some ways she was pretty switched on. You know, she knew what she wanted to do. She capitalised on the notoriety and the fame that came to her through all the media coverage straight after her release. So she'd been quite savvy in that way and she'd chosen that path.
Yes.
And then other times I saw a very sweet, very wounded, vulnerable person who has been so horribly abused. And she said to us, I think she's still working with 3 different therapists and medical professionals, as you would do, to really work through
Everything.
her life and her mother's death as well. She I think is very conflicted by her mother's death. You know, when I asked her, do you love her? Do you miss her? She's like, of course I do. And I think about her and she has this love for her mother no matter what. And yet she's balancing that with the fact that she decided to end her mother's life.
It's pretty
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's very heavy. It's very
Not
heavy.
light viewing, although, you know, we had some fun moments with them, didn't we? We had some laughs.
Yeah. Kenny's great value.
He's good
really
value.
good energy.
Yep.
It was great. We did get to spend, you know, some
It
solid days
was a
with
roller
them
coaster few days, so I can only imagine what their day-to-day life is like. But I think front of my mind was always that question that, you know, she will always have this hanging over her head. How do you tell your children?
Yes, and that is how or why she's written this book. You know, she's kind of been controlled for so long. She wants to be able to tell her story in her own voice.
Yes, which she didn't have, as you say.
And, you know, she's got a book out. And it's her legacy. And she said that, you know, she doesn't want to be the way her mother was. And you do very much get that sense. You know, we went baby shopping with her and, you know,
she was so excited.
Yeah.
And such a doting sort of mum to be. And again, that conflict, because remember in the baby shop, she's looking at these gorgeous little dresses and jumpsuits and she's talking about how her own mum used to, quite fondly I thought, her mum used to dress her up for beauty pageants and the things they used to do together. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you murdered this woman.
Yeah, I know.
So there's always that conflict. And I think, as I've said, I think she's very conflicted. But I think this is a fresh, new, positive start for her.
Yeah.
To not move on from, but to form her own mother-daughter relationship.
Yes.
And break that cycle.
Yeah. She's also now, you know, as we said, she's got these parole conditions which she has to spend some time with Ken.
Oh, that's right. They can only spend 2 nights a week together, I think, at the moment.
Yes, but the rest of the time she spends with her dad and her stepmom.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself, I mean, I was just looking at her Instagram page the other day. There's this beautiful photo of Aurora with her dad.
Yeah.
And she has this caption on it, you know, like...
It was second chances.
Yeah.
You know, second chances can be come in small blessings.
And I thought that was really, really lovely to see because she does now have a really fantastic relationship with her dad. And I think her dad, you know... I think he has a little bit of guilt and a little bit of, you know, he was ostracised from them. So I feel like he feels, you know, he wish he did more.
Yeah.
And I genuinely, when I watch things and the way he talks, I think he feels like he let her down in a way.
Yeah. I think they're all very determined to make up for lost time, aren't they?
Yeah, I very much sense that.
And we wish them the best. And, of course, our viewers can decide for themselves what you think of Gypsy-Rose. If you haven't seen the story, catch up on our YouTube channel or on 9 Now.